Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, a lot of you have asked me to talk about what the Maple Leafs defensive pairings could be if and when Jake Muzzin made his return to the lineup. And that day has come, because apparently Jake Muzzin's playing tomorrow against the Florida Panthers. The last look that I'm aware of any sort of practice lines for the Maple Leafs came from yesterday, and it had Jake Muzzin playing on a pairing with Carl Dahlstrom, and the other three pairings were more or less the same that we've seen them the last couple of weeks. Before we talk about who Jake Muzzin could be playing with and who may be coming out of the lineup and a bunch of other possibilities, I wanted to take a look at the Maple Leafs' D pairings and their numbers since Jake Muzzin's last game on February the 21st. Ever since the Maple Leafs acquired Mark Giordano, I really can't complain about any of their defensive pairings. Morgan Rielly and Ilya Lyubushkin have found some chemistry together, and they're controlling more of the expected goals and more of the scoring opportunities than what Morgan Rielly was when he was playing with TJ Brodie. And mind you, yes, in the minutes played with Ilya Lyubushkin, Morgan Rielly is not getting as many offensive zone opportunities, but at the same time, this pairing when he was playing with TJ Brodie played up against the other team's best players a little bit more. And I don't know if I love the idea of Morgan Rielly not getting as many offensive zone opportunities, because no matter how hard you try, and we saw this a couple of years ago when they didn't play him on the power play at all. I mean, this is going back to like the 17-18 season, I believe. There is no way that you are going to turn Morgan Rielly into a defensive stalwart. Just let him do what he can do offensively. But I have liked Ilya Lyubushkin there. If you look at the games that the Maple Leafs played last week up against the Boston Bruins and the Florida Panthers, it was TJ Brodie who played the most 5-on-5 minutes up against guys like David Pastrnak and Brad Marchand and even Jonathan Huberdeau. Whoever's playing next to him is probably going to see an equal share of those minutes. And him and Justin Holl have been excellent over the last 2 months or so. Yeah, there's hiccups sometimes, but by looking at the numbers, you could see that they've been quite effective for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And looking at a guy like Justin Holl over the last 2 or 3 weeks, he's developed a more physical side of his game that we've been begging to see from him for a number of years now, where he is cross-checking guys in front of the net, he's finishing his checks behind the net as well, and he's just not slipping and sliding everywhere and falling over as much as he used to. We spoke about Mark Giordano and Timothy Liljegren playing together at length in my previous video, but I can't get enough of these guys, and I can't say enough about them, because Mark Giordano is a guy that I've wanted to be a Toronto Maple Leaf for a really long time now, and Timothy Liljegren is another guy who I'd petitioned hard for over the last couple of seasons, and there were doubts about him even being a top 6 defenseman at the beginning of this season. So to see how far he's come in his development to this point has just been awesome. They'd be absolutely insane to break up those two guys playing together in the short term and in the long term for what it could mean for Timothy Liljegren's development playing next to a guy like Mark Giordano. Jake Muzzin never really looked right from the beginning of this season, but you factor in maybe some injuries that we don't know about, 2 concussions as well. It hasn't been a good year for Jake Muzzin. But if we're looking at Jake Muzzin's game score from this season, those overall numbers were dragged down a lot by 2 games that he played when attempting to come back from that first concussion. So I don't know how much we really want to read into those. As long as we're still being fair to Jake Muzzin, up until last season, he was still one of the best two-way defensemen in the entire NHL, and doing so, playing the majority of his minutes in a shutdown role next to Justin Holl up against the other team's best players. To see him go from that to where he is right now in less than a calendar year, it's hard. You want to believe that there's still some version of this player still left, but an injury against the Montreal Canadiens in the playoffs, a pretty bad one against the Columbus Blue Jackets. The year before that, he broke a bone and then was sick heading into the Boston series. A number of playoff runs with the LA Kings. I don't know. When Jake Muzzin returned from the first concussion that he suffered this year, he spoke about a hesitancy that he had to play the type of game that he needs to in order to be effective. There was a game against the Seattle Kraken where he went in for a hit along the boards on Mason Appleton, and he hesitated, he pulled up a little bit, and it was a real awkward collision, and he came down really hard on his arm and was forced to leave that game, but did come back. There's a lot of things going very right for the Maple Leafs defensive pairings right now. They got to be real careful when it comes to adding a guy in who wasn't right from the start of this season, has had some health problems and some confidence issues as well. As for who Muzzin could play with and who comes out of the lineup, I don't know if they'll do it, but they could roll with 11 forwards and 7 defensemen, and that would really allow them to ease him back into minutes and not disturb the other pairings at the same time. But it's awkward, 11 forwards, 7 defensemen. And as long as we're talking about easing Jake Muzzin back into the lineup, even if they do go the route of 12 forwards and 6 defensemen, I can't see him playing very many minutes, and probably not in a shutdown role. The one thing that I really hammered home before the trade deadline is that the Maple Leafs really needed to acquire somebody who could help them spread out those difficult minutes. And in getting a guy like Mark Giordano, they accomplished that. There no longer is a need for just one defensive pairing that handles the bulk of the shutdown and defensive responsibility. They could spread that around. Morgan Rielly and Ilya Lyubushkin, they've played well together by the numbers, and I like Ilya Lyubushkin. I'm not going to say to take him out of the lineup, but at the same time, I don't like the fact that Morgan Rielly is not getting as many offensive zone opportunities as what he did while he was playing with TJ Brody, and Morgan Rielly's just so good offensively. You don't want to deprive him of that. They tried to make him a better defensive player in the 16-17 season by pretty much exclusively playing him on the penalty kill. They didn't play him on the power play almost at all. They gave those minutes instead to Nikita Zaitsev, and I mean, that Mike Babcock tried. I got to give him that, but way too big of an overcorrection there, Mike. As much as I made it sound like a problem, it's not. There is some risk involved, like we talked about, but if you are able to get him back up to speed, or even just 70 or 80% of what he used to be, that's a really damn good player that you could just plug into your lineup and have as an extra guy, basically. And the one thing that I can say is that a guy like Ilya Lyubushkin, who got sucker punched by Taylor Hall and had some neck problems, and the days afterwards has had neck problems previously in his career, if he's not at 100%, don't play him. A guy like Justin Hall, who got hit in the back of the head with a puck and was bleeding, if he's not at 100%, don't play him. I want to win games, especially up against the other really good teams in this league, but it's not always the best team that wins the Stanley Cup. It's often the most healthy. So if they're not at 100%, don't push them. But Steven, what happens when Rasmus Sandin comes back? Whoa! One thing at a time. Today is Monday, April the 4th. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Yesterday, Sheldon Keefe also said that William Nylander was dealing with an illness and that they'll see how it is tomorrow, which is today. And today they're saying that it'll be a game time decision. And he's played really well the last couple of games on that third line. So if he's not in the lineup tonight against the Tampa Bay Lightning, it's a huge loss if you're trying to size yourself up against what could be your first round opponent. Jason Spezza being an extra in yesterday's practice, I wouldn't read too much into. There was an agreement put in place when he first signed a contract with the Maple Leafs a couple of years ago that he wouldn't play every game, especially back-to-back situations, so they're just giving him a day off. If we're looking at their most recent game up against the Philadelphia Flyers, I don't really know how to evaluate it because it's a game that they played Saturday night against the Flyers where they got 2 games coming up back-to-back against the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Florida Panthers. Maybe they didn't give it 100% in this one. Philadelphia is the 5th worst team in the NHL, and if you can conserve some energy and save it for the games against Tampa and Florida coming up back-to-back, and still beat them 6-3, yeah, I'd probably do that. You know who did give it 100% in that game, though? Wayne Simmons. Scored his first goal in 32 games, had his first fight in like 18, and to be fair to him, he would have fought in the game against Winnipeg, but they preemptively kicked him and another Winnipeg player out. They were kind of jawing at each other for a couple of minutes before the whistle, and then I guess the refs decided that they had enough for that night, and they didn't want to deal with it. But they also broke one up early on between him and Zach McEwen in this game against the Flyers, but they had their opportunity to go at each other later on, and maybe that's why the refs were breaking up Wayne Simmons fights. They wanted to spare the other guy from getting their butts kicked. I could have talked about this earlier, but I saved it because I'm sure we'll be talking about it a lot over the next couple of weeks, but Jack Campbell made his return to the lineup, and I put a poll out on Twitter that received 213 votes, and I asked, how did we think Jack Campbell played last night? I know it's his first game back, but I'm curious because I was watching the game while out for dinner, so I didn't catch everything. But I did record it and watch the full game afterwards, and I agree with a lot of people that replied here. The first 2 goals, what do you really want him to do there? But the last one, the deflection, again, what do you want him to do there? But could have had it 50-50. You know, the majority of the people voted that he played good. The next voted for okay. Very few people voted for needs to be better. So I think if I had to cast my vote here, if I could place one for in between good and okay, I'd put it there. Especially because the team in front of him really didn't give it their all. But let me know what you thought of Jack Campbell's first game back and what you think about Muzzin potentially playing tomorrow. Sheldon Keefe did say that it was likely, and not 100%. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section below, and make sure to like the video if you did like it and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. Guys, 2 big games coming up. They beat Florida and Boston last week. Oh man, if they can keep this rolling, if they beat both Tampa and Florida, man, I want to live in the universe where that happens.